People in the class, everyone, I would want to now teach you something really brilliant. In terms of questions, we just have one particular kind of questions which is being asked in the exam as well. But more importantly than that question is the understanding of concept, which will make sure that we don't have to mug up the things. Now you will start to understand relating the graph with the equation with the calculation, everything right from the scratch logically. So let me now, people in the class, make you people recollect. As I said, most of the people knows the concept of characteristic line, that too not in a as logical manner as we will learn now. Most of the people, everyone knows the concept of characteristic line, but they don't know characteristic line is a concept as a part of sharp index model, because it is Sharpe who says everything is linked to market and people, so is the return. So Sharpe says a security gives the return because market gives return of the market and return of the securities are linked, which means Sharpe says, according to Sharpe, let us try to relate the market return and the security return of, numerous historical periods. For example, let me try to plot the returns on the graph. How many of you remember I have explained it to you? People in the class, x-axis, x-axis is independent axis and y is dependent. So among the security and market, who's dependent on who? People. Between the security and market, which one is independent and which one is dependent? I want you all to be 100% attentive. You are going to like it, everyone. Which one do you see is dependent and independent? So obviously, needless to mention, return from market is independent, and on the return of market, the return of a particular security, let us call it to be the security A, depends, right? Which means, as per Sharpe, as per his underlying logic, we can plot or we can decide the axis to be y being the dependent axis, return of security, and x being an independent axis, return of market. Now, when I looked at the historical data of, for example, past 50 years, I tried to plot it in the graph. For example, I tried to figure out, hold on for a second, let me make the presentation as well beautiful. Try to make it beautiful, if not really beautiful. So suppose in a particular year, I saw that. So let me plot the things. So for example, uh, 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 if I make it 2, 4, 2, 4, 6, 8, fine. So it is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Similarly, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. So I looked at the data of the past. I figure out in a particular year, when market gave a return of 4%, security gave a return of 6%, and to the two returns, if I have to plot it in the graph, this point turns out to be the point which is to be plotted, right? This point is needed to be plotted. Similarly, then for another year, I checked what happened. Sir, in that year, when market gave 10% return, security gave only 8% return. So sorry, when this gave 10, this gave 8 return, and this point was to be plotted. Similarly, I went on doing it right for different years. When I did it, I realized that people, this was turning out to be the case. People in the class. Are you people able to connect to the point that, sir, generally there would be a positive kind of relationship between the security and the market? Sorry, between the market and the security. which means generally saying there are exceptions, but generally saying when the market is going to give a return, higher return, security automatically gives a higher return, and accordingly the point will be somewhere at this point, and the security gives, the market gives medium return, security gives medium return, the point will be somewhere over here. Security market gives lower, security give lowers, the point will be somewhere over here. Which means there would be certain one-off circumstances, sir, when security market gives a lower return, but something very positive happened to the security, a big deal or something, which is why security gave a positive return. There would be scenarios, sir, where market really gave a higher return, but something negative happened with the company. For example, a company the company faced a severe litigation, right? And because of which the market price of the security fell down, and the security gave a lower return, which gives me a return of this. Which means, do you agree broadly the line should look like this, except for these exceptions on account of unsystematic risk factors, which is not linked to market, like this. Requesting your responses, are you people to able to connect? So Sharpe says that based on the historical returns on the market and the historical returns of a security, we can try to predict even the future returns of a security. Right? Sir, how would you predict? Sharpe says, let us try to find out a common kind of a line between the securities. Common, which means average kind of a line, which means there must be one line which should represent the entire, which should represent all the dots. If there is this dot, this dot, this dot, there should be one line which represents all the dots, which is line kind of a this if we have to prepare. So let me now change a few things. Hold on for a second. Yeah, cool. So if we try to prepare an average kind of line, right, which represents all these dots, right, can be used, that line can be used to predict the future. Okay, so for example, let us try to create that average line, and that average line turns out to be like this. Hold on for a second. That average line turns out to be like this. So this line, people, which is a kind of average of these dots which are plotted using return of market and return of security, which line will be used to predict the future return, is called as characteristic line. Sir, how will it be used to predict the future returns? Life is pretty simple. Now, for example, you are expecting, because Sharpe says the return of security depends on the market. So, for example, if market, you are expecting the return of market to be 10%, right? You can simply look at the line and find out at this 10% where is this line turning out to be. For example, this line is turning out to be at the point of 11% return. So simply the calculation become, if the market is going to give you 10% return, then security will be giving you 11% return. And do you agree this is nothing but the data of your past observation? Like, this is the conclusion based on the past data and observation. Similarly, if you are expecting the market return to be 16%, right? Then based on this calculation, the return of security is also going to be, everyone in the class, 16%. Similarly, if the market return is expected to be 4%, then return on the security is expected to be 6%. Are you people in the class please realizing that using this line we can predict the return of a security if you can predict the return of market? Requesting your responses, please. Could you connect to the entire thought? Everyone. Quick, yes, no. Dhananjay, hold on. We will figure out how to write this down. But please kindly share your feedbacks, updates. Are you able to connect to the thoughts? But the question is, how would I find this line out? That I will try to teach you. Right? I don't want to get into the statistics much, but the point is that there is this concept called as, you know, so let me not get into it. Sir, how do you make this line? Let me not get into it, right? But I mean, not in its statistics term, but in a manner which is limited to CA final. The point I'm trying to tell you that, sir, this way we can predict the return of the security based on the return of market. But the question is, every time I have to predict the return of security, will I be needed to make this graph and then predict it? No. Not necessarily you have to make this graph every time you have to predict the return of security. Do you realize every graph, right? On that graph, if you have a line, every line has an equation. How many of you remember as a kid every line used to have an equation? For example, y is equals to mx plus c. This kind of an equation is used to be the equation of a line in your 8th, 9th, 10th, some bits, like some standard, some class you must have read it. How many of you remember? Y is equals to mx plus c. And please observe the math again. Please observe the maths again. You'll have to be all there. I'll make sure you find it easy. Sir, y was a dependent variable. X used to be independent variable, and please observe this. The calculation of y is being dependent on the number of x. If x become 1, you get some other answer of y. If x become 2, you get some other answer. Which means, do you realize in this entire equation, y and x were being called as variables. Variables. Which means if you vary, if you change the value of x, similarly you will get the changed value of y, the varied value of y. They are called as variables. One is dependent, independent, another is dependent. Cool. And do you realize those two variables become the part of the axis x and y? Because most of the students who mug up the equation ultimately don't even realize that out of these four numbers, which two are variables. So simple common sense, now onwards you are never allowed to forget it, that sir, the numbers which come on the axis are always the variable. The one which come on the x-axis is independent variable, the one on y is dependent variable. And on the for the purpose of characteristic line, how would you decide which two are the variables? Sir, common sense, characteristic line is based on the concept of Sharpe, and Sharpe says, and obviously it is the calculation related to the returns. So Sharpe says return of a security depends on the return of market, and automatically you get independent and dependent variable, and automatically the value of x and y. Requesting your responses, are you able to connect the maths with the basics, with everything, with finance portfolio management people? I'm yet to speak. I'm yet to speak. So let me now say x to be, let me now y to be, don't please, this part at least you don't write it down. Dependent variable, independent variable. Now, sir, what used to be m and what used to be c? How many of you remember m used to be the slope of the line? Slope of the line. Everyone in the class, I just need your quick interaction. That, sir, to the independent variable in the calculation of mx plus c, m used to be the slope of the line. People, what is slope? That is really easy to imagine. Easy to imagine. Do you agree that how steep is the line is the slope? For example, it is a lesser slope. For example, it is a lesser slope. As I proceed towards up, the slope increases. It is a higher slope. So slope, as you feel in the common sense, is the same slope. People, are you able to connect? And sir, what is the way to calculate slope is quite easy. Is all logical. Is all logical. How many of you remember as a kid? How many of you remember as a kid we were being taught the slope as One second. Hold on for a second. How many of you remember as a kid we were being taught slope as change in y due to change in x? People, you remember the formula of slope, that how much does y change due to change in x? Slope used to be change divided by change, and let me now put it to you that it is a logical formula of slope. Correct? You tell me. For example, if I make the line like this, so please imagine, do you agree? Due to change in, wait. Do you agree? If x changes by 3 blocks, if x changes by 3 blocks, y is changing by only 1 block. So 1 divided by 3 is a lesser slope. Similarly, if I make the slope like this, please imagine this. Hold on for a second. Okay, see this. Or for example, see this. If this would be the line, can we say due to change in x, this is x axis, how much x has changed? For example, 2 blocks, block 1, block 2. Due to change in x, which is by 2 blocks, right? 1, 2, 3, and 4. The y has changed by 4 blocks. It has a slope of 2 times. Do you agree the calculation of slope itself is a common sense? That, sir, due to change in x, if y is changing more, which means the line must be pretty straight, right, pretty vertical, I must say, right, and that is why it has a higher slope, and this has a lower slope, because due to this much change in y, due to this much change in x, the y is changing slightly, being a lower slope. So can I say the formula of slope itself is logical? It is made to, you know, uh, it is the same slope that then we are able to imagine when we have a slopey road. We say, right, the road has a slope. That is what we used to mean. Requesting your response. Are you able to connect to my thoughts? I need to take you ahead to the next step, please, everyone. Are you able to connect to it? Everyone requesting your responses. So now we remember the formula. And do you remember, I can connect you to one more things. Do you remember independent variable is always in the denominator and dependent variable is in the numerator? Due to change in x being the independent, how much is the y changing being the dependent? And everyone, what is x in our class and what is y in our class? So for us, if you realize, everyone, if you realize, one second, hold on for a second. So the formula of slope, as I know, is change in y due to change in x, and for us the formula become change in return due to change in return of market. How much does the change in return of security? And if you observe this formula really well, what do you see, everyone? Due to change in return of market, how much are the return of security changing? That is nothing but everyone in the class deriving the equation at your own, people, is the beta of the securities. The name of the securities, I must say, is nothing but the beta of the security, people. And if you observe this beta, do you make this equation at your own, that m, which is nothing but the slope, will be people in the class, beta of a security, will be beta of the security. And hence I would say, hold on for a second, let me figure out how do I write it. So hence I would say that dependent variable being the return of security is nothing but whatever is the return from market multiplied by beta. Are you making the equation of the line? The answer is yes, so that you don't have to mug it up and so that you are able to understand what is going on and what is this equation for. As I said, you want to predict the return of a security based on the return of market. For that, not every time you have to do a graph and do the calculation as I was doing. No, you can make this equation. In this equation, put the number of beta. As you change the return of market, as the return of market will vary, the return of security you will automatically get, right? And last is plus this C. I remember my teacher used to teach me as constant. My teacher used to teach me as constant or intercept term. Wait, we are lack of space. Which means, it means that, sir, if if the independent variable becomes zero, if the market does not give you any return, independent variable, which is the return of market, if that becomes zero, which means, do you agree, even if you multiply beta to it, the answer becomes zero? So when independent variable becomes zero, how much return, when this becomes zero, how much become the return of security? That is called as constant term, because do you agree, when this becomes zero, return of security is equals to C, the constant term, the intercept term. So same thing, if you have to observe on the graph, please observe it here. Sir, when return of the security becomes zero, multiplying it with beta also becomes zero. Then how much is the return of the, then how much is the return of the security? Do you observe this point of 3%? 3%? Which means when the market gives zero return, how much is the security return? Is this 3%, which is everyone in the class officially called as alpha. Alpha, 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 right? And that is what is the officially equation of characteristic line that, sir, if you want to find out the return of a security, or you may also call it to be the expected return of the security, since it is about the future. Return on a security or expected return on a security is nothing but how should I write it? Because if I write it this way, you might get confused, sir, what is a return? So let me keep it simple. Let me not put it expected return. Let me keep it return of a security is nothing but beta into return from market plus alpha. Sir, why have you written down? Why have you written down these two things in pink? So that you people realize that in the equation, in any equation, these two numbers will always remain as variables. In the sense, if the number of beta is 2, you put 2 here. If the number of alpha is 3, you put 3 here. But for these two, for RM and RA, you don't put any numbers, they remain as variable. Because if you can recollect, how many remember y is equals to 3x plus 2? We put a number in place of slope. We put a number in place of intercept term, but we don't put a number in place of x and y because they remember variable. As we put the number of x, you will automatically get the number of y. Hence, these in this equation, RM and RA remain variable. You don't put a number in this place of RA and RM. People requesting your responses, could you understand the entire concept? Yes or no, I need a validation. Please. People, I need a validation. How settled are you, everyone? Did you like the concept? What do you say? Dhananjay, Sahil, Gargi, Pranali, Durga, Omkar. Are you people settled? Are you guys liking the concept? Right? Cool. So, I must tell you one more thing. Sir, If it is a security, generally I believe should be the case of security. If it is a security, you can compare market and security. However, if it is a portfolio, you will have to compare market and portfolio. Doesn't matter. In which case, you will say return on a portfolio. Return on a portfolio will be equal to beta of the portfolio multiplied by return of market plus alpha of the portfolio. Are you understanding the point I'm trying to make? If it would be a portfolio, you will show your presentation accordingly. That's all. Rather than security, if it is a portfolio, you will do your calculations according to it. Sir, beta of the portfolio, how would we calculate? You know how to calculate weighted average beta. Beta of a security into weights will be the weighted average beta of the portfolio. Sir, alpha of a security is still fine. We will somehow get to know, we will learn how to do it. But how would we do it alpha of the portfolio? You can first of all understand that highly probably examiner will not ask you anything of this sort, but still alpha of the portfolio, people get into the details, is nothing but the weighted average alpha of individual securities. Oh my god, I don't even have to teach you this. Do you agree that alpha is nothing but a kind of return? That if the market gives you zero return, how much is the return of security? So similarly, if the market gives you zero return, how much is the return of the portfolio? Can I say portfolio return is nothing but the weighted average return of individual securities, which means alpha of first security into weight of first security, alpha of second security, weight of second security, and so on will be the alpha of the portfolio, because it is nothing but a kind of return. People, could you connect to even this? Sir, what do I need to write for you? Certain basic things. RA is return of security A. RM is return of market. Beta is obviously beta of security A, and alpha of A is alpha of security A. Meaning to say, what does alpha mean? Let us try to also write it down. What does alpha mean, everyone? How much return will the security give if market gives zero return? That's the meaning of alpha. Cool, everyone? So this is all from my side with respect to understanding the concept. Now I will specifically tell you, people in the class, how do you look for how do you solve a practical question for it? Sir, for that I want you all to come to the question itself. On the basis of question, I will try to explain the process as well as apply this concept over there, right? So in the question examiner, primarily, there are other questions as well which we will go through, including the one which was asked in May 23 so far as I know, right? But for now, we will go to the basic type of question of characteristic line, which will ask you to prepare equation of characteristic line. Which means to be prepared, to be able to prepare the question, all I need is that RA, return of a security, remain variable, return of a market remain variable, which means all I need is the beta and the alpha. Sir, how do you calculate beta? You all know really well. Regression method or correlation method, depending upon the data, right? In case of characteristic line, it has generally been my observation, right? The data is always exposed data, because if you are able to recollect, the calculation of characteristic line depends on the past data. Hence, it is generally a case of exposed data, which means since it is exposed data, taking you to a level, interlinking the things, since the question of characteristic line is generally based on exposed data, people, we can apply both the methods. Which one? Correlation method and regression method. So calculation of beta will happen that way. Calculation of alpha I will explain to you later on. Can we proceed to have the calculation of beta first of all? So let me take you to the question.